and improved Wrestle Talk show. I'm your host, Joshua Zimmerman, here again for our much anticipated, and a lot of things got held up in getting new production equipment, quite frankly, webcam software, and had some computer issues and made a move at the end of 2013. Our intent was to really be up and running last summer, but a lot has happened in wrestling, and we couldn't wait to get back to you guys, because you guys, the fans, are what made the show the way it is, how popular it was, and we're forever grateful. Our channels again are Twitter at CWE Company, freewebs.com/WrestleTalkShow for all the latest interactive wrestling news, polls, anything and everything wrestling, from the independents to the wrestling giant, as you'll from now on hear me refer to World Wrestling Entertainment as such. You have a say in your wrestling, and I think the problem since before I came on the air or to record this, I was thinking, well, what do you want to do as a starter, as a reopening to Wrestle Talk Show, and where Wrestle Talk Show last let off, and the conclusion I came to is there really isn't any good place to not start. Wrestling's seen a lot since we've last been on the air. We're going to touch on a little bit of everything. It's not going to be hours upon hours. It'll give you my take on a variety of different things and then move on. We'll introduce right now to writing your questions to CWE Wrestling, ENTINC, Entertainment Incorporated. It's CWE Wrestling, ENTINC at gmail.com to apply to Continental Wrestling Entertainment. We're really excited to be making the announcement of our summer tour, our booster with Custom Ink, our vendor agreement with pens.com. A lot of exciting promotional materials are coming our way, merchandise lines, a summer tour that I hope that we announced that we're with On Deck Capital to secure a $10,000 business loan with them, and we're just gonna help out our fellow promotions. We're gonna grow our brand, but there's my biggest pet peeve at wrestling is promoters that step on other promoters for the sake of stepping on them. Wrestling is a big enough pie, with independents being the grassroots. To when you get to World Wrestling Entertainment, independent wrestling is the grassroots. You're never going to change that. Your stars get molded at your smaller events, where when the guy first started, just a rough example, he made $20 a show and gas money. We'll get right into CWE news and then move into our wrestling news. It's news, but I was discussing with the lawyers yesterday on how to address this issue regarding a named John Swagler, who was a longtime talent with Continental Wrestling Entertainment, helped us with a lot of promotional stuff, was one of the original CWE wrestlers, who was kind of the example of what CWE was trying to do. Take the guy that had a passion for wrestling in his heart, turn him into a wrestler, let him hone his craft, and if he wanted to make our brand better, great. But if he wanted to move on to better things, even better. Because I believe that all the promotions can work together if all the promoters simply looked at it that you're a promoter of the business, not yourself. And I hate to use the term so literally, but they should do what's best for business, but instead you hear too many horror stories and why wrestling gets a bad rap on promoters that don't live up to agreements, all kinds of things. Google, I'll just generalize it and say Google anything and it's probably happened in independent any business infraction has probably happened at least once to a majority of the promoters, and that's just speaking knowing the key promoters in Pennsylvania. But if it happens here, it happens everywhere. It's like crime. It's an epidemic. But Jonathan Swagler was formally charged Monday with 2 counts of rape. The reason we also wanted to jump in front of this is myself, owner, promoter, and CEO of Continental Wrestling Entertainment, felt that I had an obligation to address this and say, back in 2010, Mr. Swagler, while we were molding the last summer tour that we tried to launch, and the wrestling ring didn't show up to an event, is the last time I seen him, and it wasn't his fault, but just touching back on how he was a long time talent and asset at one point to the organization. Back in 2010, Mr. Swagler lived with me in my apartment, rented a room from me in my apartment, and wanted to. There was 4 months left in the lease. He needed a place to go. I was on my way out. He was in a transition phase. This gave him 4 months and me 4 months where I didn't have to give my landlord out of my pocket half my rent, because the other half was being covered by Swagler, who later dicked me on everything owed, and basically went back to Cedar Avenue in Croydon. In 2010, it was alleged that during a sleepover that took place that may or may not have, no one knows for sure, except the girl that it happened to, and I would encourage her to reach out, please, and email me if you were, CWE Wrestling, ENTINC@gmail.com, because if in fact in 2010 this happened at that quote-unquote sleepover John wanted to have with a friend that happened to be a girl, when she came to the apartment, my best friend JJ is the one that gave John Swagler myself, and he drove us to behind a trailer park behind the Red Raven to pick this girl up, if this is the incident in question. And then I basically told him, because I don't take up much space, you have run of the living room at night, I take the master bedroom. My desk was in there. When Wrestle Talk Show was still going on, I'm sure many of you remember shows, the origins of that show were there. And the next morning when I came out for coffee, remembering this vividly, because of what happened 2 days later, she was just real quiet and shy like she had been the night before. But I just assumed it to be, she didn't know me that well. She was John's friend, and outside of hi, I was more or less in her eyes John's landlord. And that didn't bother me, because it was a friend, I was told at the time. So one, he implied it, but I really didn't. If you're already a friend with, it would be a harmless hangout, sleepover. Maybe that sounds naive, and it wasn't intended to sound that way. But if a couple days later, all this came out, and I can only assume that no one believed her. But if she would have said something the next morning outside of bye, and then me never seeing her again, and John downplaying the incident when she cried rape a couple days later, he downplayed it to the mother of his children. And he downplayed it to me, and it went away. Or so I thought. In my Bristol house, Bristol Township, Pennsylvania, Levittown, Pennsylvania detectives came to my door asking me questions about the incident at that time. And the only thing I feel deeply bad about, and it couldn't be helped, is nothing was said the next morning. And when I closed my door at night, I was in the back master bedroom. Anything could have happened, because even if I were awake all night, I didn't hear the living room. That was part of the perk if I wanted my own space, a break from Swegler. It was like dimmed out the sound, and I could relax in my, everybody has their space. But we quickly released him. He was on a permanent, well, I'll just call it an auto re-sign, because basically he participated in every CWE promotional venture we had him take part in. But all I can say is I hope she emails me, because when I was questioned by the detectives, I told them everything I knew, because it was a little eerie. He specifically wanted to John Swegler. He already knew my background coming up to the door. And asked me if I was behaving, and I played stupid and said, with what? Because since 2005, I have not had a legal run-in. And I gave him all the details that I could, and I'm just upset because it sounds like her cry for rape went ignored, and it took the rape of the second girl and a plea bargain by him, by the way, 16 years in state prison, via plea bargain, and I'm told by sources close to it that during the proceedings he just shook his head, and because his mother and father were present in the courtroom, he downplayed any time that the prosecution went into graphic detail on his offenses. But he was out on bail, but Monday the judge also denied him bail and re-sent him to state prison, or county for now, and then he'll go up once it's decided, or once it's implemented, I guess. I can only imagine how long their transition phase when you're actually sentenced is. Maybe it's the same day. And a close connection to Swegler got mad at me on a Facebook conversation we were having, Amber, because I was just saying that if you're in a Pennsylvania native, you know that county, first of all, it's for sentences 24 months and under, and it's the Horsham Clinic when it comes to sanitation and rank and file. There, you're seriously just a number. There, they'll take advantage of you. There, you'll probably get shanked if you don't know what you're doing. And Swegler doesn't, as his mugshot represented 2 black eyes and blood vessels being popped in the right eye. But I was saying to Amber, 16 years in state prisons and federal prisons base their implementation of the prison sentence into rehab and having programs in there, better programs than county lockup. It's not the 24-month stay. It's the anything over 2 years and up stay. He'll be able to go back to school. He'll be able to find a job in the prison to make money. Prison will just be his world, and that might be a nightmare, but I don't think it's a punishment for someone like him in the way he thinks, because John was always a nomad. When he wasn't at his house in Cedar Avenue in Croydon, Pennsylvania, and thanks to the Croydon Town Watch and the Bucks County District Attorney's Office for sending me that information. We don't feel John doesn't deserve this. I'm just saying that he'll get better treatment than the risk he'd take being a being a convicted rapist in county where state prison will go out of their way to protect him, go out of their way to give him something of a routine, a job, mealtime, yard, etc., etc. But for John always being a nomad and moving from place to place anyway, this will probably be the best 16 years of stability John Anthony Schwegler has seen in his life. Because if he wasn't on Cedar Ave, he was on Main Ave with my former partner, James Kincaid, who lived less hygienically lower than John himself did, and I think that's where John picked up the undesirable traits, and just his attitude on life as the world owed him. But I just wish that in conclusion, the girl would have said something to me privately, because in 2010, the day after it happened, I would have ensured that John Anthony Schwegler went to jail that day, and I was there as a primary witness, because he not only did these horrific events, threatened someone, children, threatened kids. This past Saturday, 2 days before his sentencing, when we got this when the news broke Monday, or Sunday afternoon, I believe I got it, that he was, no, Monday afternoon, yeah. But that was just 2 days out from his sentencing, and because he had a job and wanted to be closer to his kids, he never cared about his kids when he would come down to Levittown, or had a place to go while he was renting, when this offense happened, a room from me. He had his home and his daughter on Cedar Avenue, but he was never in Croydon. He was in Levittown. So I don't deny that he could do this. I don't think he got his just deserved, as he's off the streets and people are protected, and thank God for that. But taxpayers shouldn't be paying for scum like this. I heard that a brother of the kids he threatened on Saturday was going to beat the shit out of him. And that guy he should have hurt before he went into jail, because that's just a vicious animal when you take advantage of a woman like that. But we terminated the contract immediately, because it's a pay-per-play contract with him, because we never knew where he would be 6 months down the road. We gave him a short-term contract, but we've canceled our ties with him, and we can only hope that the victim reaches out, and I can deliver my sincerest apologies, as this will be posted on our Wrestle Talk page, and probably my personal page as well. Facebook.com/CWE Company, Facebook.com/Wrestle Talk Show, YouTube.com/CWE Company is where you can view this video and over 100 more with hours of free content. Like us, repost, post. Start the debate on wrestling, because anything, anytime can be a topic. Starting with, and the gods have been listening, the cancelization of TNA. And why do I say this? Because for the last 90 days, we've all been hoping for, or awaiting, the network Spike TV to auto-renew with Impact Wrestling, as it had since 2001. and when the product was actually a wrestling promotion and not Dixie Carter just spending money to lose it long term. And she's taken stories, resolved them in an hour, and that could have given the character talent work for months down the road, as the PW Torch's Wade Keller and I believe Jason Powell discussed yesterday on the Live Torch podcast, pwtorch.com. They're a great website. Wade's an awesome guy. And we encourage you to go check that out and everything else they have to offer. They offer free apps, VIP service, $10 a month for basically anything and everything you can think of wrestling. Wade Keller has covered it, and James Codwell has covered it. But here's my dilemma. There's talk now that the wrestling, it inspired the locker room as soon as they hit the Hammerstein Ballroom, and it brought something out of the talent that nobody's seen in a while. And the talent, it's a shame that Spike, they're going to lose the deal with Spike, and they're taping months in advance because the wrestling has gotten that much better. Right at the time when it seems like they're going to lose major stability as an operating company if they lose this cable deal on a struggling Spike TV, who is having hard enough time getting any of its show's ratings. It used Impact as the flagship, and there was actually an audience for it, but now it's more Dixie Carter spending money just to spend it, and the bringing back of the six-sided ring. Let me narrow this all down. First and foremost, I've always encouraged the talent of TNA to give it their best. I hope TNA in the years past would be a success and bounce back from its drought, because when it launched in 2001, it was a formidable product and great secondary to watch to WWE programming, or when it wasn't on before the launch of the network. Now, what Dixie's done with it is just, anybody else would have done this in any other business, spent what she spent, negotiated the kind of contract she has where her own talent admit they make more money on the independent scene, quote AJ Styles most recently, than they would have TNA all year. That just truly shows that these guys are doing it, and Dixie's trying to hold on to something that really was never there since they started their decline. They spit out between a 0.8 and a 1.0 week to week. It was bigger than that. Like I said, they were a formidable secondary, still below WWE's radar. Like WWE wasn't going to go to battle with them like they did WCW. But TNA always, their downfall, I've always said, is they're, like Wade Keller said, more or less, their creative hasn't changed. You can bring back anything you want in TNA. Bring back Sting, bring back Hulk Hogan. There's questions that not having Hulk Hogan is hurting TNA. And maybe that's true to a point, but there's a lot of things that TNA had that WWE didn't, that wrestling fans wanted to see. And over time, their creative department, because there's no structure executively in TNA, creative gets to do whatever they want. The stories get to roll however they roll. Vince Russo can tell you that. He's admitted to that. He's, in some ways, just been a contributing factor to the most horrible things that have happened to wrestling as an industry in his wrestling career. He makes news just because he makes news. he antagonizes himself so he comes out in the news. Like, he can't write. He was a contributing, I believe, writer to Impact Wrestling, TNA, and it was a hush-hush deal. And like Jason Powell said last night, that could have been why, because Spike also, it's being reported that Spike had a problem with finding out last minute that the man who hurt wrestling's reputation almost to its core, Vince Russo, was an off-the-books employee to TNA, the more and more it's sounding. And maybe that's why in the last 90 days, business conduct could have been a contributing factor, because like Wade Keller and Jason Powell both said, the auto-renew on Spike and TNA Wrestling was almost a shoo-in every year or every time it was due, because it generated a rating. But now that I feel bad for the talent, because now it seems like they're putting on the best shows for themselves, and also their brand, but their brand has already lost the major exposure that it needed to become. TNA Wrestling might as well start over, and please, before you do, fire Dixie Carter or anyone with the last name Carter, because she doesn't know how to run a promotion. She doesn't know how to operate a business, let alone be a wrestling promoter. And when you're copying off your competition with Option C instead of Plan C, like the WWE had, and having EY as your champ while Daniel Bryan was your champ, your beard storyline, that's not who TNA was. And it's a shame, because like I said, they were once good. But I think if you get rid of Dixie Carter, you're fine. If you actually hire wrestling writers, creative writers, they'd be fine. The writers don't care any more than the management does. So the writers know they're getting paid, but it must not be much, or they're really horrible writers, and they've proven that they're really horrible writers. And we can only speculate what they make as C- writers, but they give the company anymore no individuality and being its own brand. That was a success for WWE, so let's do that, but let's do everything opposite, so we're not using the same names and scenarios they did, by the skin of their infringement teeth. It goes back to what I was saying. It doesn't matter that they don't have big names. The Hardys can generate for them. And at one point, TNA is responsible. Not at one point, but AJ Styles' success is a result of TNA. TNA formed their wrestling superstar, and then he winds up reporting on his own company that he makes more money in the independents. Japan loves him. Hello, they love Daniel Bryan too. Like, but with TNA's scenario, they formed the wrestling star and then let him get away. And that's what I liked, and I've commented for years about TNA, is it was good to see wrestling that they formed their own wrestlers. They didn't try and hire from the bigger company. I mean, they made some acquisitions like all businesses do, but they created their own superstars of wrestling, superstars of tomorrow, if you will. And the more and more they declined, the less and less they did that, or their gimmicks didn't take, like you've seen in most cases. It's just been a poorly run promotion by Dixie Carter, and anyone else in any other profession would have been fired, probably would have had criminal charges brought against her, because I'm pretty sure if she's legally been able to do all this and still here, I would encourage the SEC to look at the books and anything, or small business administration for where they're headquartered, because something's got to be. Anyone else would have been fired and told that they couldn't run a hot dog stand, let alone run a business or a wrestling promotion, which requires its own set of finesse, is delusional. The talent, I hope, by the time this tour for TNA is over, that the talent can transition from the tour just into the Hardys, get enough heat back, where a lot of this talent gets jobs. Like I was explaining to my sister last night, all the talent at one point or another has been through WWE, but with cost-cutting measures already in place because of the launch of the network, and the fact that more or less all of them, between the acquisition of WCW and ECW, have come through the WWE at one point or another, they would only end up being shaved off months down the road if they were to be acquired today. So it would be the same outcome for some of them, like Scott Steiner talking about how his run didn't work out for him. There's a lot of different things, but I think the biggest thing in wrestling right now is the WWE Network, who a recent lawsuit claiming that only 800,000 of the projected 1 million WWE promised in subscribers within the first 6 months to a year of the launch of the network had not been fulfilled. Therefore, shareholders had a legal right to file suit. Misleading practices is how we'll sum it up. And if that's how it is, then yeah, they're owed something. But Linda McMahon is quoted as calling the wrestling business the cradle to the grave. You don't know when the bottom on professional wrestling or a wrestling promotion itself. I won't say professional wrestling, because there's independents that have less money to work with that are better than WWE, like ROH and CZW and more, many to mention. Smoky Mountain Wrestling, hashtag I am wrestling. Put that in everything you have wrestling, guys, because it supports a great cause. Independent wrestling, like I said, is the grassroots of our industry, and where would we be without it? We wouldn't have WWE or pro wrestling as we know it. So please be sure to check out pwtorch.com, our booster campaign for $15. A donation of $15, you'll receive a CWE custom-made t-shirt. We designed it ourselves. It's a standard shirt just to raise funds for the independent wrestling scene in the Pennsylvania and surrounding areas. We operate in New Jersey, Delaware, New York, West Virginia, Utah, and South Carolina. But right now this campaign is focused on Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. Well, I shouldn't say it's focused, but where the wrestling is known, we're trying to get the foothold increased, get brand exposure. Like I said, new merchandise is coming out. And $15, folks, donated to the Wrestling CWE Ops Fund. Basically 100% of the proceeds will go towards funding the summer tour that we're planning on bringing you the first weekend of September. Date, venue to be announced within the next 2 weeks. Names to be announced within the week as negotiations are ongoing. And check that out at facebook.com/WrestleTalkShow or facebook.com/CWE Company. And remember to like us and refer a friend. We don't try and bore you. We take your topics. But back to the WWE Network. WWE scored big here, and maybe, yes, long term, because we all know with technology you had kinks. A lot of people reported problems when the network actually physically launched, and that's to be expected. And I think it was naive, maybe not harmfully misleading, but misleading nonetheless, that WWE would give a projection like that and not make sure there was a projection to make sure the first projection was in place. You've got people sold on the fact that when they sign up for the network, they get their pay-per-views for $10 a month, and that's the drawing point right now. If you ask me, it's a good investment nonetheless. Even if you don't watch the network, you're getting your pay-per-views for $10, so you might as well watch the network. Problems with the interface and stuff like that are going to happen, but I don't think it should happen for a long time. But when you project a number, you don't know. I could say this page will get 100,000 likes in an hour. And if somebody gives me money on it, based on that information that I just said, I would owe some of that back if I only got 800,000 in the hour. And that's more or less what WWE did. And that's why I think normally I don't like lawyers or lawsuits. But that's where I think if shareholders are actually going to go through with this, they're the investors that are in it for the long haul. Because like I commented in a blog on Facebook.com/WrestleTalkShow and Facebook/CWE Company, where I give in-depth blogs in my notes section of my page, it's gonna take a bit. They still have to sell the people that are on it, or already have thought this out, where, hey, for what they want for the network, I'm going to end up getting my pay-per-views for free. It's $10 a month for my pay-per-views versus what would it be, like hundreds and hundreds, 50 times 12, 5, over $1,000 in pay-per-views, roughly, and that's just an off-the-head guesstimate at barely 9:30 in the morning. But these are where I think that's a double-edged sword, is these are also the investors that have conference call after conference call the last couple months have heard these promises, more or less the way Vince presents it. Yes, it's not making money now. It's draining us. We cut talent, writers and referees and whatnot to try and balance it out. We're putting a lot of money into it for its day-to-day operation and long-term success. But these people signed up in 2010 to be a part of that long-term success. So they knew going in what they were getting into when he borrowed the initial money during, I believe, the first Linda McMahon Senate run to start creating the network. And then we were held off for a couple of years, and the network launched when it launched. And they're at over 800,000 subscribers for the network, and a renewal's coming up. And I really think they'll get more people, because times are tough everywhere, and they'll sign up just to sign up. With the network, sorry, my sister will be coming in a moment. With the launch of the network, $10 pay-per-views may be worth it as we approach a renewal period for the people that gave the first 6-month renewal. Are they going to? They'll add to it. I mean, they've gotten the people that they've gotten because of what they're offering now. As they get the kinks out of the network itself, I do believe WWE being WWE, the remainder of the projection will come through.
Look!
Yeah.
Hey.
I forgot your sandwich, dude. My bad. I wasn't having the best morning.
Yeah, mine.
I dropped my coffee.